Being was the one that basically started the whole plot of Solo Leveling, and the reason why I say this is that basically in the beginning of the series, or they don't really, well, not in the beginning of the series, but they explain it later on. But they said that, you know, in the beginning of Solo Leveling's world, that there was only light and dark, and the absolute being turned those light and darks into the light was the rulers, and then to the dark he turned them into monarchs. So the absolute being is kind of like the god of Solo Leveling. He's the one that basically creates the whole earth, that creates the light and the dark forces, and he's the one that basically caused the millennia war of the monarchs and the rulers. However, the rulers kind of caught on to this, and they were like, wait, why did this guy make us do this never-ending war with the monarchs? So they were like, we kind of need to do something about this, because this guy's just in the back laughing at us, and he's just doing his own thing. And so what the rulers did is they basically plotted to kill the absolute being. And then when this happened, there was only one ruler that stood up to this. He was the brilliant fragment of light, and he was later known as the Ashborn, the Shadow Monarch. But he was the only one that stood up to him. Either way, the rulers were able to kill him and the absolute being, and this turned out to basically the rulers were able to use the power of the absolute being exclusive items into very powerful weapons that allowed them to turn the tides against the monarchs. So the monarchs were forced into hiding, and that's kind of where the absolute being stories end. And that's kind of where all the rulers and everything, and then that's kind of how the whole story started from the ruler and monarch war. He was the one that basically created the whole cascade of effects that turned the rulers into actually starting to release mana into the world of Earth, because the monarchs were wanting to capture Earth. So that's really all for the absolute being. That's really all we have in the records of why the absolute being was and what he did in Solo Leveling. He was the one that created the whole world of Solo Leveling. But other than that, there's not really much else. I guess he was kind of the person that Sung Jin-woon first saw in the little dungeon, and where he gained this power of the system. But that's kind of speculative. There's no really facts or recorded knowledge that says that was the absolute being, and it's probably not. It's just like a statue that was made after him, and that's what he probably looked like. And we all know the famous creepy smile of that statue, and it's like one of the most known faces in Solo Leveling. But that's kind of my theory. I don't think that we actually know if that's the absolute being or not. Who was the greatest fragment of brilliant light? He was the strongest ruler that ever existed, and he was also the most chivalrous and most loyal ruler there was. Eons ago, when the monarchs and rulers had their devastating war in Solo Leveling, the rulers later figured out that the absolute being, which was the god of Solo Leveling, was only using them for entertainment for his own purpose. So when the rulers found that out, they were like, yeah, we're not rocking with that. They went ahead and plotted a rebellion against him, and it was to kill him and use his powers to defeat the monarchs, which they later did actually go ahead and execute that plan. But then the only person that was able to stand up to all the other rulers was the fragment of brilliant light. So this didn't go well for him, and he also, at the hand of the rulers, was executed just like the absolute being. But on death's door, the fragment of brilliant light was able to kind of resurrect himself, because he saw a power in the absolute being that was a mysterious power, which was probably the power that created the monarchs and the rulers. And he used that power to basically resurrect himself into a more powerful state that he wasn't when he was a ruler. And that's how we got Ashborn, the Monarch of Shadows. So after the war, when the rulers used the absolute being's powers to capture and destroy the monarchs, so when Ashborn came back, he realized that the war was almost over. They had captured Legia, and they forced the other monarchs into hiding. And he was very disgruntled at this, and he wanted to side with the monarchs, because he knew that the monarchs and rulers had to always be in balance. So even though the rulers that he knew before, his friends, his family that he knew before, they wanted to forgive him. They wanted for him to forgive him. their actions in the past, and they wanted to, to basically forgive their sins, and he just wasn't rocking with it. So he went ahead and became basically one of the most powerful monarchs afterwards, and he even went to go ahead and he went in hiding to build his army so he could destroy the Beast Monarch and the Demon King, which were the ones that came after him while he was in this transformation. So leave a like if you guys liked the video, and let me know what you guys think this reminds you of. This kind of reminds me of the fallen angel Lucifer and the biblical stories, and I think that it's definitely, in this solo leveling, is definitely taking a bit of the piece of the lore from that and try to put it into like the rulers, the absolute being, Ashborn, and all the other people. I think that it's very similar to that. But let me know in the comments what you guys think, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Dad is Sung Il-Hwan. And the reason we're going to be talking about him is because he was a ruler. But his story first starts off about 10 years ago in the solo leveling timeline. And the reason why he became a hunter is because he was trying to provide for his newborn children, which was Sung Jin-woo and his sister. What happened is that when he went into one of his dungeons that he was grinding out like all the hunters do to make a living, he went into a dungeon, and all of a sudden the dungeon just closed on him. He couldn't, like, there was nowhere for him to go. It just closed on him, and he couldn't get back to civilization, basically. And he was stuck in there for about 10 years. He was just living on killing monsters and surviving in this dungeon for about 10 years, until eventually he's going to die of starvation because there's literally nothing left in the dungeon. And then that's when a miracle happened, and the rulers came down and wanted him to be one of the 7 vassals. I'm going to make a video on one of the 7 vassals of solo leveling, so leave a comment below if you guys want to hear, or if you want me to make that video. But he became a 7 vassal, and he became a vassal of a ruler. So that ruler gave him extreme power. The 7 vassals are probably the most powerful hunters in solo leveling. But in exchange for that power, he had to basically go on a mission to kill the Shadow Monarch. However, Sung Il-Hwan didn't know in the future that the Shadow Monarch was going to be his own son. So that's kind of a dilemma going on right there. But after that, he eventually came back to the human world after the rulers, gave him his powers, and he trained and tried to use them. He eventually came back to the human world, and he ended up in America, in one of the American dungeons. And all of a sudden, a group of A-rank hunters ran into him, and they were like, whoa, what the hell's going on? There's this dude in here, and he doesn't really speak English, probably the most powerful being in this dungeon. So Sung Il-Hwan was kind of pressed. He really couldn't do anything, so he just knocked them out. He couldn't communicate with them, and they were about to, basically kill him. So he just knocked them all out with ease, just because he's such a powerful hunter. And then later on, the Federal Bureau of Hunters in America went on to arrest him because they thought he was a magic beast because he couldn't communicate with them, and that he was such a powerful being. The person they sent in to and basically interrogate him and to get answers out of him was Hwang Dong-so. And if you guys didn't read Solo Leveling, Hwang Dong-so is a brother of a hunter that Sung Jin-woo previously killed in one of the dungeons. So as you can see, there's definitely a conflict of interest going on there. And once Sung Il-Hwan found out that Hwang Dong-so was trying to get revenge on his son, all hell broke loose. He basically just blew up with his own powers. He blew up the Federal Bureau's Hunters HQ in like a second, and then he just brutally destroyed this guy, Hwang Dong-so, in a fight. And then when he was about to walk away, he said, you know what, don't ever touch my son, don't ever go to Korea, if not, you're gonna fucking die. And then basically that's the last time we saw him. And then he went on, later reappeared back in the manhwa when the monarchs were starting to set their foot onto Earth, and he found out that the Frost Monarch was trying to, the Frost and the Beast Monarch and the Insect Monarch were trying to kill Sung Jin-woo. So he kind of lured a trap for the Frost Monarch. He started leaving mana traces around dungeons, and the Frost Monarch finally came to him, and he tried to do an ambush on him and kill him there, but unfortunately it didn't work out because the Monarch was just way too strong for him at the time. Next time we see him in the in the manhwa, there was an international conference for the hunters because they couldn't find out. They needed to find out who was killing the ruler's vassals, who were killing all the influential, strongest hunters after the Christopher Reed assassination. They thought it was Sung Il-Hwan. So the whole every hunter in the world was found out that Sung Jin-woo's dad was still alive, and Sung Jin-woo was really mad about that because he didn't know that his dad was alive, and all the hunters in the world were keeping it a secret from him. And then that kind of led to Il-Hwan figuring out that Sung Jin-woo was the actual vessel of the Shadow Monarch. He was one of the 7 vassals in Solo Leveling, and that he kind of had like a midlife crisis. He was like, do I really have to kill my own son? And he wasn't really rocking with that. But later on, the rulers kind of, the rulers kind of helped him out because Sung Jin-woo actually went ahead and killed Legia, like the Monarch of Giants. And so the rulers were like, wait a second, this guy might be on our side. So, you know what, Il-Hwan, go and protect your son, and we'll see if, this works out. And as we know, it kind of did work out because later on when the monarchs were trying to kill Sung Jin-woo, the Beast Monarch, the Frost Monarch, the Insect Monarch, they all went and tried to, hold this like ambush on Sung Jin-woo, and it almost worked. They almost killed him. I mean, the Frost Monarch and the Beast Monarch impaled him, and they thought they killed him, but Il-Hwan came in at the last second and basically held off the Frost Monarch and the Beast Monarch by himself. And those are probably one of the best manhwa panels in Solo Leveling. It just looks so good, that fight between them. And then he basically held them off until Sung Jin-woo reawakened his powers, and that black heart came into his body, and he reawakened he gained full powers of the Shadow Monarch, and Sung Jin-woo just swiftly dispatched him like it was a breeze. He didn't struggle with him at all. And then after that, he went and found his dad. And his dad was literally on death's door because he had used too much of his ruler's powers, and he was literally fading into dust. And later on, kind of just told him his whole life story, like what happened, why he never saw him. He was stuck in a dungeon, and what he was doing behind the scenes. And then he told him that he was, really apologetic for not being in his son's life, and that even though he wasn't there, Sung Jin-woo really grew up into a man. He was very proud of him, and the last time we saw him in the manhwa is that he was giving a hug to Sung Jin-woo while he was crying, and then he eventually faded into the dust. So that's really all we know about Il-Hwan. If you guys have any more, leave them in the comments below. But the only unique power that Il-Hwan had was that he was kind of like an assassin type of ruler. He was able to just instantly just put on like a shadow or cloak or something, and he would instantly disappear. So you couldn't find him magically, you couldn't find him physically. He was just invisible. He would just go in and out of existence. So that's really the only power that he had. Thomas Andre is one of the strongest hunters in America, and he's the #1 national ranked hunter. And little did we know that he was also a ruler vassal. So the upbringing of Thomas Andre is that he was a little kid, European immigrant that kind of got bullied around in high school or middle school. So he kind of tried to grow out of that and tried to brawl his way through respect. And so he did eventually get that respect. He was a known brawler throughout his area. And then he became a hunter after the magic beast in the dungeon started to pop up after the rulers and him made that happen. It took that opportunity and went ahead to become the strongest ruler or the strongest hunter in America. And then after he got all that status, he became the #1 nation ranked hunter. That's when the rulers decided to give him, a vessel power. He was also the hunter that was able to bring down Kamish, a servant of Antares, the monarch of destruction and the king of dragons. So the Kamish was a magic beast that came out of a S-rank dungeon and kind of did a dungeon outbreak, which is, dungeon monsters come out just like the Jeju Island raid, and it affects the earth instead of just the dungeon. And Kamish was an incredibly powerful dragon that basically wiped out the whole west coast of America. And without Thomas Andre, he probably could have wiped out the whole America as it is. And he was also the person who recruited Hwang Dong-so, which was the brother of a dungeon crawler that Sung Jin-woo killed in his previous dungeons. and this is what led them to find each other, because Hwang Dong-so was enraged, and he went ahead and tried to go ahead and hunt down Sung Jin-woo, which really ended up bad for him because Hwang Dong-so literally got beaten to a bloody pulp. And as soon as Thomas Andre showed up, Sung Jin-woo was like, yeah, I'm not gonna give it back to you, and he literally beheaded him right in front of Thomas Andre. So Thomas Andre was very angry about that because he was basically family to him, and he was part of his guild. And so he went ahead and fought Sung Jin-woo, which didn't work out well for him as well, because even though he used the spiritual manifestation in the fight, Sung Jin-woo literally bodied him with just his fist. So it wasn't even close. So after being humbled in the fight with Sung Jin-woo, Thomas Andre, thought better, and he thought better of Sung Jin-woo, just because Sung Jin-woo didn't, go ahead and kill him too. He didn't go ahead and kill the guild. So he was, he admired him for, having self-control in that situation. So he went ahead and got Kamishi's wrath, the daggers from the fangs of Kamish that he used, and he tried to turn them into daggers, and he gave them to Sung Jin-woo, which gave Sung Jin-woo an incredible power boost, just because it matches to the power of the user. And right after that interaction, that's when a gigantic S-rank gate, or just a mana gate, opened up, and that's where the Beast Monarch, the Insect Monarch, and the Frost Monarch all came out. And a few days later, Thomas Andre went against the Beast Monarch, which didn't go well for him. He was able to hold his own for a couple minutes, but then once the Beast Monarch actually used Spiritual Body Manifestation, he kind of got wiped, and he lost his arm in this fight as well. And so that's when Sung Jin-woo appeared, and that's when the Insect Monarch and the Frost Monarch and the Beast Monarch tried to kill him, but as we all know, that only awakened his powers, and he was able to become stronger after that fight. So then we see Thomas Andre again in the final battle with the Antares and the other monarchs, and that's when he went against the Iron Body Monarch. He learned from his last fight because he was able to bring Belian and Biru, the generals of Sung Jin-woo's shadow army, and he was able to hide them in the shadow, and with the three of them together, they were able to dispatch the Iron Body Monarch, even with the spiritual manifestation. It wasn't even a sweat for them. Thomas Andre only really had two notable skills with him. He had reinforcement, and reinforcement just increased his attack power and his defensive power, and it really just put like a golden suit of armor on him. And then he also had capture, which was a skill that was similar to a black hole. He could just basically pull anything and anyone towards him, and that was one of the skills that helped him defeat Kamish, because the Kamish was a dragon and he could fly. So that was one of the skills that able to bring him to his level, and he was able to beat him. Yeah, so that's it. That's all we know about Thomas Andre. Christopher Reed was one of the most useless ruler vessels in solo leveling. So the only real history that we know about him is that he was one of the most powerful hunters in America, and he was also a national ranked level hunter. And there was only 5 in the national ranked level hunters, as we saw from the previous video when I was talking about Thomas Andre, who he was number 1, but Christopher Reed is ranked number 3. So this guy's no pushover, right? But Noma, there was a physic in America at the time, after she had her conversation with Sung Jin-woo, she went ahead and visited Christopher Reed, saying that she saw a vision of him dying in the next couple of days. And Christopher Reed was like, I don't really know, that might be a little facetious, because I'm a national ranked hunter, I'm the strongest hunter in America. I don't think anybody's gonna come and kill me. But then a couple of days later, he actually started to, so after that, he went into his house and kind of just holed up and tried to barricade it, and just ride out the wave and see if it was actually gonna happen. And unfortunately it did one night, when he woke up in the middle of the night and it was very quiet in his house, and he realized that the monarchs there was one in front of him and 2 behind him. And as we know, those monarchs were the Beast Monarch, the Ice Monarch, and then the Queen of Insects, the Insect Monarch. After that, he was like, yeah, I'm fucked. Like, I can't call for help. I can't call Sung Jin-woo. So I'm gonna go ahead and just duel it out. I'm gonna try to fight them and see what happens. And as we all know, that didn't go too well for him. We saw like one panel of his ruler manifestation, but it didn't work out for him. Later on in the series, Thomas Andre tried to fight the Beast Monarch, and he got his ass whooped. So Christopher Reed against 3 monarchs, It was a wrap from the beginning, as we all know, because we saw his body, his mansion basically destroyed, and his body was amongst the rubble. So that's really all we know about Christopher Reed. It's probably the shortest ruler vessel video that I'm gonna make. Gun-Hee. He was the strongest Korean hunter before he had to retire and after Sung Jin-woo became a S-rank hunter. So, as we know, Gun-Hee was the chairman or the association chair of the Korean guilds. And we knew that because once, you know, Sung Jin-woo was ranked S-rank hunter, Gun-Hee got in touch with him and he was like, yo, you should join our association just because we need help dealing with all the other guilds in Korea and we don't have any powerful hunters to do that. So he got in touch with him. Sung Jin-woo was like, yeah, I'm not rocking with that. So, well, I'm just gonna, you know, reject you, old man. Get out of my way. That's kind of the first introduction that we have to Gun-Hee. But after that, we kind of, you know, throughout the series of Solo Leveling, Gun-Hee is constantly by Sung Jin-woo's side, going over, you know, just like in the Ant Raid, he was the one that was, you know, constantly begging him to go ahead and join the Ant Raid, which Sung Jin-woo eventually did, even though his mom just literally came out of a coma. Gun-Hee is always like pestering Sung Jin-woo and is always by his side just because he knows that, you know, once people become a certain strong or a certain rank hunter, or he becomes a, you know, a strong icon in the hunter basically community, he knows what comes with that because he used to be the strongest hunter in Korea. So he kind of you know, basically like adopted Sung Jin-woo and was kind of his pseudo stepdad, if you will, just because of he was looking out for him. He basically drew up his backstory, doing like a background research on him, and he knew that Sung Jin-woo was doing the hunter missions to help support his family. And Gun-Hee kind of had like a soft chord for that. And then later on in the series, we found out that Gun-Hee was actually a ruler vessel. And we found that out because the Frost Monarch was setting traps for Gun-Hee and literally showed up to his office and was about to kill him. He wanted to go out strong. He used his ruler vessel's powers, but even though he's like an old man, he's in the 70s, he couldn't really, you know, stand a chance against the Monarch. Even like as we saw with Christopher Reed, he didn't even stand a chance. So the Frost Monarch basically killed him. It allowed Sung Jin-woo to come in and basically force the Shadow Monarch away. But at the time that Sung Jin-woo came in, he was almost dead and he was on his deathbed, and he had a few parting words to Sung Jin-woo, and then he swiftly died after that. So that's really all we really know about Gun-Hee. Liu Zhigang is the strongest hunter in China, and he's the national ranked level hunter in second place. And the reason why we're talking about him is because he is one of a ruler level vessel. A ruler vessel is somebody that, you know, that the rulers thought was a strong human, and they basically passed his levels or their powers down to him, just like Sung Jin-woo got the powers of the Shadow Monarch. So for how cool and intimidating this guy was, he never really had that much screen time in the manhwa. So the only things that we know about him for sure is that during the Jeju Island raid, you know, when Sung Jin-woo was fighting the Ant King, you know, all of them, after he finally beat Biru, after all the ants, you know, found out that their king was basically dead, they all started to run away. And what's the closest thing next to Korea? China. So basically Liu Zhigang basically mounted a defense against all the ants that were coming out of the island raid. And it basically went well because he's a strong ass hunter, and he literally destroyed hundreds of these S-ranked ants in a flick of an eye. After that, we saw him in the international conference with, you know, all the hunters in the world discussing who the hell killed Christopher Reed, the third strongest hunter in the world. And everybody was thinking Sung Jin-woo's father, Sung Il-Hwan. As we all know, Sung Jin-woo was really, you know, shocked by this, and he was really upset. And Liu Zhigang, you know, tried to size him up during this. He was talking crap about his dad. And then he realized that, you know, Sung Jin-woo is no pushover. And he figured out, like, yeah, there's no way I could match up to this guy in a fight. And then that's really all we know about him. You know, we never saw his spiritual ruler manifestation like Thomas Andre did. We never got to see any of his powers. All we know is that he was just this cool, badass guy that had dual swords, and he was like the protector of China. That's all we really know about him. Go.